Okay, so you've made the shock decision to not buy an SUV. Instead, you're opting for a more traditional form of practical family transport, the wagon.
You want something that's just a bit posher than your average load lugger, although your budget, let's say around $56,000, does rule out the established luxury brands.
So let's have a look at two strong contenders, the new Peugeot 508 GT Sports Wagon.
Or this, Mazda 6 Atenza. But which one's better?
Sam, we've got to talk about exterior design because this Peugeot looks absolutely striking, don't you reckon?
I think they've hit it out of the park with how this car looks. It's amazing.
Some really nice details. Flat bonnet with no overlap.
Yep, that's nice.
Very distinctive.
These 18-inch wheels, they look quite good, but I reckon it'd look even better with 19s, don't you?
And you can get them as an accessory option, and
Okay.
yeah, I think they would help fill those wheel arches just a little bit more.
Definitely.
But look at this absolutely flowing, sleek roofline. It's just beautiful.
It's like a shooting brake almost, isn't it?
It is. And you know what? The wagon version is only 17 millimeters taller than the sedan, and that's only because of the roof rails.
These little guys, great.
Now, open your door.
Ah, beautiful.
Frameless windows.
Very nice.
On a wagon.
Very
That
nice.
is very cool.
Makes it feel much sportier than your average wagon, doesn't it?
Exactly. And you also got that kind of sort of coupe effect with the gloss black B-pillar, window surround. And I've got to show you this rear end because look at that. That is a low mean stance.
I think the stance is great. It looks fantastic. And the details are nice too. I like the retro badging.
Yeah, I like the GT badge. That looks cool. Now, this is a very Porsche-like approach to the spacing of the Peugeot lettering. And something else I like, the dual exhaust tips. Real, not fake.
The Peugeot's brand new, and I guess that makes this Mazda the elder statesman of the two. It came out in 2012 as a third generation, but did get a major update in 2018. Although I have to say, Jez, most other cars would wish they aged as gracefully as this Mazda 6.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, look, a fourth generation Mazda 6 can't be too far off, you would imagine. So this doesn't have the latest Mazda design language. But look, it's elegant, it looks nice and long, it's got a maturity to it.
I think these 19-inch dark graphite wheels look fantastic, bit of chrome splashed around the place. It's definitely got a mature, nicely aged vibe to it.
Yeah, agreed. And what we've got here, two very different approaches to wagon design.
Absolutely.
The GT is the only specification available for the 508, with Peugeot opting for just the one highly spec'd model. It's priced from $55,990 in this sports wagon form, which could be viewed as bold pricing considering another $7,000 or $8,000 could get you into a wagon from Audi or BMW. You wouldn't get the same level of equipment though. The Peugeot, for example, features Nappa leather upholstery, heating and massage functions for the front seats, and a focal 10-speaker 515-watt audio system. The drive position, now this is a big talking point because Peugeots, the latest Peugeots traditionally, they've got some funny ergonomics. The iCockpit approach is based around this very small steering wheel, and it's still small inside this big 508. But it is better in this car because whereas in, say, the 2008 or the 308 Peugeots, I have to kind of drive along like this to see the speedo and digital display. Here I can be in a more natural driving position and I can see all the key information I need. There's also a very beautiful looking infotainment system, widescreen, 10 inches, some very fancy piano keys here for shortcuts. Great if you're an Elton John fan. And there's even a wireless charging tray, though you may struggle to find it when you first get in the car, but it's actually under the center console here. You just reach under there, a little bit of an awkward reach. So it does fit largest phones, just don't want to have a cover on. But that's very modern tech. What else do we have? Well, we've got a sunroof. That's an option on this car, $2,500. Worth a tick if you want to have some extra light in the cabin. Just doesn't open as far back as you expect it to.
In the back seat of this Peugeot 508, and I love the design of these seats. It's the same up the front. It's a very stylish feel overall. However, I feel like these back seats are a little bit more upright than they could be. My knees feel high as well. It's that risk of being cramped if you're a little bit taller. In terms of amenities, I've got air vents here, no controls however, and 2 USB points down below. You can fit a water bottle into these door cards, a little bit of carpet on the bottom, which I think is a nice touch. And if you're keen on skiing, couple of cup holders there, but there is also a ski port.
The Mazda 6 Atenza wagon steps in with an immediate price advantage, costing from $51,190. Yet it matches most of the 508's features while adding ventilation to the front seats, heating to the rear seats, 19-inch wheels, and a standard non-panoramic sunroof. Its infotainment and driver displays are both smaller, though it has a colour head-up display to complement the latter. It's a much more conventional, much more conservative design in the Mazda 6's interior. But hey, I think that's helped this cabin age so well for a car that is, what, 7 years old. The Atenza does get some very nice trim touches. We've got this traditional Japanese timber insert here on the dash, also on the doors. We've got this pseudo suede material that is very prominent on the dash and the doors. And it's just so lovely to touch, really nice, very smooth. The seats, you don't get any cushion extensions like you do in the Peugeot, but you've got a longer cushion and it's a very comfortable driving position. The infotainment system, well, it's the old MZD Connect system rather than the much improved system that you get in the new Mazda 3, and that will be coming to other Mazda models. 7-inch screen, feels a bit small in a car this size, but I do like the rotary controller. It's just a very intuitive way to control your menus. You do get a sunroof as standard in the Mazda 6 Atenza, and while it looks smaller than the one in the Peugeot, it opens about the same distance.
The nice interior materials continue into the second row of this Mazda 6. We've got the suede here, and if you ever need to touch wood for good luck, that is the real deal. Now, you might not think there are any USB points in the second row here under the air vents, but they're hidden away. In this armrest here, you've got cup holders, heated outboard seats, which is a nice touch. Open this little lidded compartment and you've got 2 points there, which I think is good. These seats aren't as nice to look at as the Peugeot 508, but they are nicer to sit in. The backrest is more raked and I've got more leg room and toe room around here. So if you're a little bit taller, this is certainly going to be more comfortable. Now, tech and features are all well and good, but there are a few things that a family wagon needs to do well at its core. And I think you'd agree with me, Jez, the boot is one of those things.
Yeah, you definitely want a big boot. And look, we did get the tape measure out earlier because we're very thorough testers, of course. And we established that the Peugeot's boot is a few inches wider.
Yep, but this Mazda is a little bit longer.
Yeah, so officially 530 litres.
This is 506, so not much in it really.
Very, very close. Now, practical features in the boot. I've got a cargo blind.
Yep, I've got one of those as well. Yep.
Excellent. Temporary spare wheel.
Yeah, there's one under there.
I've got some integrated bag hooks.
Yep, these ones fold down. And next to that are some levers to fold down the second row.
Right, which we should do. Because when you don't have kiddie winks in the back, okay, well, my seats don't go fully flat, which is not ideal.
These are a bit better.
Oh yeah, that's good. Okay, well, I've also got some load rails.
Yeah, I've only got a couple of tie-down points at the front there, so that's definitely a bit better.
Okay, and I do have an auto tailgate.
Right, well, one's quicker.
Ah. Right, so how is the iCockpit for you, Sam?
Such a different experience behind the wheel, isn't it? Makes it feel very unique, this car. I know it's a bit polarizing as well, but for me, I like it. My sitting position, personally, I sit over the wheel a fair bit, but having this wheel nice and low, I'm comfortable. I can see the cockpit here, I can see the road. It's good.
Now we've got drive mode button here. We've been playing around with that. We've got 5 modes.
5 different modes.
3 of which affect the damper settings.
Because this has active dampers, doesn't it? Adaptive dampers.
That's right, adjustable suspension. What do we think when we're in comfort mode?
Definitely, that's my favourite setting for this car. You can tell a difference when you put it into the sports mode. Things firm up, the steering gets a little bit faster as well, a little bit heavier perhaps. But in comfort, it softens everything off a little bit, and I think this thing rides well.
It does. I don't think it's always perfect around town. It can be a little bit fussy when you've got some potholes and some scars here and there in the servicing. But
if you wanted to option those 19-inch wheels too, which might look great, you could get a bit of a negative impact on that ride as well.
I think they would definitely have a negative effect on the ride, so I would say stick with the standard 18s. And they offer plenty of grip. You mentioned the steering, so the weighting. For me, steering's still a bit too light. Maybe there's not a lot of feel. So if you're a keen driver, and bearing in mind, there's a bit of a sporty positioning to this car.
There is,
but when you're in that sport mode, gee, this thing handles pretty well, doesn't it?
It does. It does hold the road. Yeah, it does feel. I think you mentioned that the Peugeot is lighter than the Mazda
by nearly 200 kilos.
Yeah, that's a fair bit.
Yeah,
and you can feel it. This thing feels like it feels how it looks. I suppose it hugs the road a bit more, has a sporty vibe going on. I guess one thing to point out with this light steering, which does have a bit of a negative in the twisties. It does make it easy around town. You can sort of do the one-handed moves, negotiations and that sort of thing.
Turning circle's fantastic.
Yep.
Really tight.
What
about engine? Now we've got a 1.6 litre turbo. Now this is a biggish car. That's a small engine.
It is. When you look at it on paper, you sort of think, oh, that's not good enough.
Well, especially when you consider that the other car that this engine is in is a 308 hatchback, also called the GT.
It's a much smaller car though, isn't it?
Exactly, and again, that's about 200 kilos lighter.
Yeah.
So, I don't know, I found, for me, that the response is quite nice when you're driving around town, but then there's often a time when you want a little bit more momentum, and the engine doesn't feel as effortless as it should be, and the same when you're going up hills.
Yeah, definitely. You'd wonder how it goes, say this is a GT, a touring car perhaps, if you had 5 people on board and a bootload of stuff. There is a question mark about how this engine would perform in that sort of situation. But around town, normal driving, it is better than you'd imagine, I suppose. It's made up by the gearbox, so that's an 8-speed auto.
A very good auto, I reckon.
Quite slick, pretty responsive. Makes
quite
good
intuitive,
decisions.
picks the right gears.
Definitely.
Now, something interesting about that 1.6 litre though, it's got a particulate filter.
Petrol particulate, yeah.
Yeah, so this is I believe this car, as well as the 308 GT, they're the first cars in Australia to feature a petrol particulate filter. The technology has been on diesel cars for ages, but this is on a petrol car. So that helps give cleaner emissions, which is a bonus.
Tailpipe. Yep.
The trouble is, the slight negative, you do have to use premium fuel.
That's because of the sulphur levels, is that right?
That's right.
Yeah.
So, but it is protected against some level of sulphur content, but not as high as you get in 91.
Yeah, okay.
Fuel consumption, we've found, I guess the benefit of having a small displacement engine is that there's not a lot of fuel bubbling around, and yes, this is not bad in terms of economy.
For the size of the car, I think it's quite good.
All right, I think it's time to check out the Mazda 6 Atenza.
Let's go.
We've got a big engine in this car, relatively speaking.
2.5 litres, but turbocharged as well these days.
Yeah, so it's come out of the CX-9, big SUV, and it goes nicely in that. And so, no surprises, it's translated very nicely into this Mazda 6 wagon.
Yeah, so 420 newton meters, that's a massive jump over what the Peugeot offers.
Yeah, 120 newton meters more, that's nearly 50%. I'm never good at maths, but...
yeah, let's call it that, close enough.
Well, yeah, let's just get... Oh, I mean, look at that, that's just very effortless.
It is, yeah. It's not about the straight line performance at full throttle, I think. It's just the waftiness of the car. It doesn't feel like it needs to be pinned as hard cruising around town. It's at low revs. Yeah. It just feels relaxed, doesn't it?
It suits the kind of mature theme of the Mazda 6. I mean, look, you can get a bit sporty if you want to, because look, we've got this switch down here. So look, I'll go into sport like that.
Yep.
But yeah, the engine starts feeling a bit hyperactive, and it doesn't sound that great once there's quite a few revs on board. So I would actually just keep it in the default normal.
I mean, that only does gearbox and throttle tuning, and the engine is probably happy at the mid-range anyway, right? It doesn't do anything to do with the shocks because this is not an adaptive setup.
Well, that's right. So Mazda engineers seem to take a different approach to so many brands these days, in that they don't worry about having multiple settings for suspension. They just go with a single tune.
Yep.
And there's got to be, I think they've done a great job on this car. There's a really nice balance between handling and ride.
Yeah, you don't necessarily need adaptive setups, I think, to nail what you're doing. And this does feel good, especially around town. Yeah,
it's kind of be, fit for purpose. It is interesting. Look, the Mazda 6 in the first generation, second generation forms, it was the dynamic pace setter in the medium car segment, mainstream. And it seems this time around, Mazda decided, as part of this push-up market, we'll maybe not worry to be at that pointy end of dynamics. We'll just have good handling and good ride comfort. And this is on 19, so it's on bigger wheels than the Peugeot, and I think the low-speed ride is better as well.
And on the dynamic side of things, maybe not as good as the Peugeot outright, but still very tidy, very balanced, this car, I think. I think you're a big fan of the steering too, aren't you?
I really like the steering in this car. I mean, look, it's the steering's not as sharp and as involving as it was in previous 6s, but again, as part of this sort of maturing, it's really linear, really smooth. It's nicer than the Peugeots overall, I think. Again, it's just suiting the character of this car.
Final point, interior ergonomics and comfort. This is clearly a more traditional car, not as modern and suave as the Peugeot perhaps, but how do you dial yourself in behind the wheel here?
Well, I don't want to sound like a fuddy-duddy, but you know, look, I really like that 508 interior, but there is something about the fact that everything is just that little bit easier to see. These main controls, instruments ahead of you, and I just do prefer this more normal size steering wheel. But again, you know, that can be a personal preference kind of thing. I just think there's a really suave driving experience here in this Mazda 6.
It's traditional, I think, but it's executed really well.
Yeah. Right, we've got two family-sized mainstream wagons here with extra doses of technology and luxury, and two really good choices, I reckon.
Two fantastic choices, I reckon, Jez, and these two cars are executed really well, although different at the same time, and I've got to say, this is a really tough decision to come down to.
Very tight. Look, there's a sportier vibe to this Peugeot in the way that it looks and in the way that it drives. That 1.6 litre, yeah, it could do with a few more herbs, but I still quite like it as an engine. It's got soot busing technology and it's pretty economical.
However, I think this Mazda does stack up as a bit more of a pragmatic choice. There's more power under the bonnet, there's a bit more space and comfort in that second row, and it's got the value proposition on its side by a fair margin as well.
Yeah, I think I've got to agree there. I think the Mazda just edges this contest. But you know what? If one of these wagons is going to really convince people to turn away from those SUVs, there's only one that's going to do it.
I think it's the Peugeot.